So one of the fundamental rules of woodworking is that wood expands and contracts. If you don't account for that, you're going to have a bad time. Except today we're going to ignore it, and I'm fairly certain I'm going to get away with it. The key to it is some white pine. But don't try this in every situation. It's really only going to work in this one specific instance. Don't try it on a coffee table or anything like that. So now I'm sure you're yelling at the screen that you have used pine before, and it was terrible because it warped and it moved and twisted and did whatever else. And if you bought it from the home center, that is likely true because they sell wood way too wet for furniture purposes. This came from the home center, but it has been sitting out and drying in the shop. You just periodically test it, and it has stabilized in terms of the moisture. It's bouncing between 3 and 5%, so that should be plenty for our purposes, even if the meter might be a little bit off. And up on my website, I have some tips for working with pine. That comes from the home center. So if you want to check that out, I have left a link in the description. I'm going to shut up and get to work. If you want to continue along with me, that's great. If not, just jump to this point in the video and I'll tell you how everything went. So here is the finished box. Now normally this type of construction is a bad idea because it doesn't accommodate for wood movement. And what I mean by that is the top and the bottom here are going to want to expand and contract in width as the humidity in the air changes. But the sides here can't get any longer or shorter. So that's going to constrain the top and the bottom's ability to move. Now typically that's a bad idea because when wood cannot expand and contract, it leads to splits and cracks and whatever else you might have. So you need to accommodate that in some fashion. Now that could be through frame and panel construction, or using screws and elongated holes, or using something like a plywood. But in this case, because of the species of wood, the cut, and the size of this piece, the amount of accommodation I have to do is basically zero. So let's start with the species. So this is white pine. So this works with white pines, it works with some of the firs, and there's a couple other softwoods that you could do this with. Every wood species is going to see a different amount of expansion and contraction, so you just have to choose your species carefully. The other thing is the cut. You'll notice on that end grain, all of it is running up and down. So your vertically sawn, your quarter sawn grain is going to see less seasonal expansion and contraction compared to flat sawn grain. So the other factor is the size of the piece, or really the width of the piece. And if this was to get real wide, well then that movement is going to compound and eventually it could get to a point where you're going to have a problem. But at this size, not really an issue. So when you factor everything together and you do the math, this is going to move less than 1/128th of an inch. I don't know what that is in metric, but the conversion is right here. So for the machinists out there, that's what, 7 thou? And for everyone else, that would be roughly the thickness of a human hair, maybe a little thicker depending on the hair, right? So this is going to see very, very little wood movement. Functionally, for my purposes, this isn't going to move. So I don't really need to account for wood movement, and in this case, I can get away with doing that. If you change the cut and or the species or the size or anything like that, you're going to need to accommodate for it, or you're going to have a bad time. So if you take nothing else from this video, just know that wood gets wider and narrower, but it can't get any longer or shorter. So if you are attaching two pieces of wood together, and one of them is going to get wider and the other one isn't, that's when you need to accommodate for wood movement in some way. It sounds more difficult to accommodate for wood movement than it actually is. I promise you that. If you want to learn more about wood movement, I've left a bunch of links down in the description. There is an excellent book by Christian Bexford that goes real deep into wood movement, that if you get nothing else, I would highly recommend that book. It's excellent. The U.S. Service Forest has an excellent manual that has there's some graphs and grids in there where there's a formula and you can plug it in and do the math and figure out how much movement you need to accommodate for. Katz Moses has a calculator that uses those functions, and if you put in your the cut, the species, and your location, it'll tell you how much movement that you might see. I have a blog post up if you want some tips on working with home center pine, because from the store it's not ready to build with. For furniture at least, it works great in construction, but not so much for furniture. So anyway, if you're wondering what this box is going to be for, I have a bunch of parts and pieces that are sitting around my shop. I'm working on hand planes, I'm working on hammers, and I need a place for them to go so they don't get banged up while I'm working on them. But again, we're able to ignore wood movement in this one very specific case. Don't try it on anything bigger. If you want to help out the channel, up on the site there is some hammers listed. I have some calipers up for sale, and I also have some stickers that I just got in stock. So all of those are up there. Later this year, I should have some hand planes ready to go. It's kind of in the pre-prototype stage right now. I'm making a couple. Those are going to get sent out to a few different people, and then they're going to give me some feedback. And then once I get their feedback and have spent some time with my design and getting that dialed in, I'll open it up to whomever may want one. The site is listed down below, along with all of those other resources I had talked about. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one.